Aloha, people. This is time to take a breath. This is the Oneness Point free webinar series for people who want to listen to me rabbit on about oneness. Oneness, the philosophical point of contention on the planet. And this week, not so much a theme. I'm not a big fan of the idea of themes, but this week the topic of conversation is synchronicity. And I know a lot of times synchronicity is portrayed as this outcome. It's the evidence of the demonstration of being in what people call flow. And for a lot of teachers and students on that spiritual path, exploring the nature of what is the best options, what is the most beautiful behaviors that they can conduct, the most simple relationships of love and understanding and compassion and caring, and even that sense of the wisdom of parenting. How can we be in a space that supports all of the ways we idealize that we want to be in the world? And they feel like very important avenues of investigation. They feel central to creating a foundation from which we can experience an entire lifetime of quality, of not being ashamed of who we are and how we show up, of getting it right, of being aligned, of tuning to the highest wisdom, of being the most help, of being part of the solution and not part of the problem, of being helpful to others. And all of those things feel very important. They feel very noble and humbling, because the stories about how that's possible involve humility, a humility in balance with an acceptance of our divinity, a humility in balance with the acceptance of the power to create what's occurring, to attract situations, to be the reflection of the reality that we desire through the frequency that we emanate as living spiritual beings. And if that's part of your vernacular, if that's part of your spiritual awareness and truth, then this is probably not the conversation that you want to be listening to. Because for me, synchronicity is apparent, is inherent. It doesn't just exist in some places. It exists everywhere. It's the only thing that exists. For me, flow is everything. Every emotion, every person you meet, every relationship that you have, every feeling you experience, everything is flow. For me, the experience of life is not a human being having a spiritual experience. It is spirit or oneness having experiences. There's no human in that. There's no anthropocentric. I'm not sure what happens when I try and say that word on video. It just doesn't come out. Anthropocentric notion in oneness. Spirit is spirit. There are no vessels separate from spirit that spirit must fill. In oneness, the vessel is just spirit. It's the whirlpool that appears to be a vessel, and the whirlpool is made of the same drops that everything else is made of. And it's not an illusion. It's not something to overcome. It's the nature of spirit's experience. So rather than feeling that there's some journey of enlightenment which begins in a place of not knowing and passes through, a student teaching, a student being taught from a teacher towards a point of knowing. In oneness, there's no enlightenment. All of the experiences that are being had are equally valuable. They are all experiences of spirit. So that notion of synchronicity in everything and everyone allows spirit to have all of its experiences on purpose, allows there to be no accidents. And there's a perfection in it that doesn't need to be chased. The art of allowing is a unique experience. Each point of awareness, each experience that spirit is having will know the art of allowing in its own way. And that way will change in each moment as spirit has a new experience in each moment. So rather than thinking of yourself as this separate vessel that can get it wrong, that's on a journey and spirit is watching from above and helping and poking and probing and tricking and guiding and healing or testing. There's no need for that in oneness. You don't exist separate from the experience that spirit is having, because you are the experience that spirit is having. You aren't you in any definite sense. And you already know that. You already know that in the everydayness of your reality. In oneness, there's no separation between physics and metaphysics. There's no need for them to be different rules. In oneness, physics is just physics. That's just the way the world is, via the perceptions and tools that we have available in the experience that spirit is having right now. And you can see, you can see evidence of that if it's true for you already. I'm not sure how it works for people who want it to be true and it's not true yet, because it's not my job to convince you or teach you to take you to another place. I don't understand oneness as a goal, as something that you're heading towards. I understand it as the cosmology of angels, of a particular type of angel who sees everyone and everything as already on purpose, as synchronicity. So that idea that everything's falling into place is a very cultural concept. So it's specific to the rules and ideals and norms of your culture. And that culture includes your spiritual or so-called spiritual cosmology. So you will see evidence of synchronicity according to the rules of your culture. And in my understanding of oneness, I would allow you to have those rules rather than try and convince you to adopt what makes sense to me. I would be with you while you articulate those rules. The rules I'm talking about are things like, I know things are working out when I can pay my bills. I know things are working out when I don't feel anger. You know, for some people, anger and frustration and upset are evidence that they're unaligned, or evidence that there's something wrong or out of place or unhealthy or imbalanced. And then they work to fix that imbalance, and then they know that they're back on track when life feels effortless, as if the entire universe is behind you, as if everyone you meet seems to feed into your positive energy. And in the oneness of synchronicity, positive and negative are simply charges that allow a battery to work. There's no judgment or assessment of something being positive or negative. So there are no encounters that are positive and helpful, and no encounters with, you know, people or situations that are negative and unhelpful. In the oneness of synchronicity, it's all sacred, it's all meaningful, it's all on purpose. All of the feelings, the whole rainbow, the whole spectrum of relationships, all of the experiences and the places that you have been, they're all spirit manifest. They're all spirit having an experience. And from that place, I can be with you and allow you to have positive and negative, because you are spirit manifest and you're having the experience where you get to see the world in terms of positive and negative, and you get to see yourself and judge yourself and your part in the world and where you are on your journey as positive and negative. As yet to be completed, as yet to be enlightened. as yet to be abundant, as yet to be fill in the blank. And then as I sit with you and you articulate the way the world makes sense to you, often there are arguments that you have with yourself. It's kind of you get to this philosophical nexus when all of the cards are in the same conversation, because there aren't many places where you have a conversation where there aren't any categories, where there's only one category. And so normally the conversations that we have are with a counselor, and a counselor will have the categories of things that make sense to that conversation. And then you have a business advisor, and a business advisor will talk to you about the outcomes and intentions and goals and plans and business structures and all of those things, time management and health. You know, you might go so far as to go into your mindset and, you know, the sustenance of your spirit, the intention you have for the world, the purpose of your service or product. But there will be a limit to the things that are relevant to that conversation, and they will be put into segments. So you'll have the segment of spiritual sustenance, and the segment of profit, and the segment of the marketing process. It's very rarely that you'll find a place that puts all of those things into one pool and asks you what your rules are for that one pool of information, that one pool of data, that one pool of who you are and what you do. And that's the conversation that I have with you in one pool, when business is not separate from spirit, or when profit is not separate from allowing, when marketing is not separate from anything else. What are the rules? And I don't do that to challenge you or to change you, but simply to bring it into awareness. And once it's in awareness, you get to make decisions. You get to see how it's functioning. You get to understand the conversations that you're having, because you've created all these levels, because of the segmentation of your reality. And it's not to judge them. You know, you get to make a decision about whether this is the point that you take responsibility and accept them as part of your purpose, as part of the sacredness of all that is. You know, so you would take responsibility for having contradictions. You would take responsibility and see as sacred all of the ways that you are. see the purpose of, rather than dividing yourself up and dividing your life up into that which is helpful and that which is not helpful. And you wouldn't necessarily change anything. It's not about redesigning who you are. It's actually more a process of visualizing and speaking of your wholeness. And what you do with that is really up to you. I'm not sure what this has to do with synchronicity, but obviously it needs to be part of this conversation. I mean, I guess you could just start with becoming aware of some sense of what synchronicity means to you, what's included and what's excluded, what lives up to the standard and what fails to live up to the standard. Who makes the standard? How can you tell that it passes the test? What evidence do you need to know that it qualifies as synchronicity? Are you willing to take responsibility for that definition, for that assessment? Or is it someone else's fault? Did you get the idea from someone else? Can you blame someone else for that concept? For those rules, for those standards? And what do you want to do with that either way? What do you want to do with the fact that you can take responsibility for it? What do you want to do with the fact if you can blame someone else for it? Do you want to make that a problem? You can go and process it and spend some time on yourself. Do you want to make it part of the story about how you don't have any control and these are the ways that life has been imposed upon you? And how do you take responsibility for that? If you go down that path of awareness and processing, of being the victim of life imposed, how would you like to take responsibility for that? Do you need to go back to your story about the choices you made before you came in? If you believe in birth and death and individuated soul, then does the responsibility for that imposed life get traced back to the level of soul awareness? Where can you take responsibility for it? Where can it be part of your sacredness, what makes you whole, without dividing into the goodness and badness of being you? And if you can take responsibility for it, for the way you divide the world into that which is synchronous and that which is not, that which is working and that which is broken or yet to be completed, yet to be assembled. If you can take responsibility for that, can you also accept it as part of what's sacred, not just about you, but about all that is, about the way the world works, about spirit itself, herself, himself, whatever language you're more familiar with, whatever your truth speaks. You know, it makes me think about mortal sin and the imperfection of humanity, that concept that being here necessitates your imperfection, your separation, your suffering, the samsara. The cycle of learning until you get it right, or learning until you don't need to be here and exist anymore. If that's your story. And synchronicity is part of that story, where synchronicity is only some things and not all things. And you can take responsibility for choosing or knowing which things are synchronicity and which things aren't. How does that become a reflection of your perfection? How does the incapacity to be perfect, if you're alive, how does that become part of the story about your perfection? So, say you're meant to be here as an imperfect being, learning on the journey toward perfection as per your instructions. So perhaps there's a packet of knowledge with instructions that you were given at some point, or that you are continually given, however that translates into your language. And the perfection of that can be traced back to the source or the giver or the knower of things. And you're following orders. You're doing what you're told. And in that way, the imperfections of who you are directly related to the perfection of who you are. You are perfectly manifest with the instructions that you have been given. Can you see how that works? And that no matter what the cosmology is that you have, there's a way to understand the perfection of that cosmology, the perfection of your behaviors, the perfection of your judgments and assessments, wants and needs and desires and struggles and oppositions and challenges. There's a way of understanding those things without changing them, you know, without transforming them, without relanguaging them. There's a way of understanding them in your wholeness as part of your perfection. And it's an inclusive. So you could go into spaces like the so-called ego. And no matter what your concept of the ego is, there's a way of understanding, of comprehending, of including that ego concept in your wholeness as part of your perfection. I just think that's what I see when I have conversations with people is I see the wholeness of their perfection. Even in the allowing of the rejection of that, because there will be those that, kind of do the process and then realize it's not true. The concept of wholeness and perfection is not true for them. And by going through the process with me, someone who's not trying to take them anywhere in particular and asking questions rather than telling them how it works or what they need to do next or how to heal it or change it or fix it or transform it or upgrade it or attract it, protect it, download it. In that process of questions and handing back the answer, because I don't know and I'm happy not to know, we can get to the point in that process and the person says, actually, it's not. I know what it is. I'm not whole. And there's no perfection in that. And I know what my journey, my path, my purpose, my role, my job is. I know what to do next. And I said, great, that's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. We wanted you to have an experience of knowing thyself. And if it comes to the question of loving thyself, people can say yes or no. They might need to do a few things before they're willing to love thyself. And that's all on you. There's no pressure. There's no need for you to go into that space. It's the knowing thyself process, which is more just a seeking, which is more just an asking of a, bringing into the light, bringing into awareness, articulating all in one conversation, all in one long sentence or phrase about who you are and why you're here and why the world is the way that it is. That awareness is enough. Often that's the end of the conversation that we end up having. Love thyself. There are some people that want to go into that part of the conversation, and that's only if spirit wants to have that experience, because in my understanding of oneness, you are spirit manifest, you are spirit having an experience. So we will go into the love thyself part of the conversation if that's necessary, meaningful, purposeful, invited. And then the be thyself part of the conversation, you can skip the know thyself and go straight to the be thyself. You can have know thyself and be thyself. You can have know thyself, love thyself, and be thyself. There's no rules. There's no separation between those things. They're not separate stories. They're just topics of conversation that we can cover. And in the synchronicity of all that is, I don't need to take you anywhere. I just need to follow my instructions. And when you show up to have that conversation, you're doing what you're doing. I can't articulate what that is. It's not for me to say. That's why I ask so many questions. And I can only honor the experience that I'm having. I can't promise you anything. Or at least not without being untruthful. And that be thyself conversation is different for everyone. Once you know what your rules are, you know, the cosmology of your cultural preconceptions about who you are and why you're here and how the world works, why other people are doing what they're doing, why systems operate the way that they operate. You know, for me, it is a matter of simply being. I just follow my instructions, have the emotions that I'm having, and be in the situations I'm in. Pay attention and honor whatever's going on as sacred. And I know for other points of awareness in spirit's experience, be thyself means something completely different. And I think rather than try and convince you that you can simply be like me, I don't want you to be like me. I want you to be whatever makes sense to you. I want you to be the victim if that's what you need to be, and to have the story that allows you to honor that experience, even if that includes self-loathing. I don't want to fix you and come in and change what's occurring. I want your sense of self and responsibility to be what it needs to be. And if you decide at the end of that conversation, you know, if we end up having the be thyself conversation and you rail against it and you say, no, I need someone to give me instructions and tell me what to do, and I need someone to guide me, to set parameters. I need someone who's going to make rules for me and say, you can't have that, and you have to do this every day, and you need to speak like this, and you need to aim for that and have these goals and set these intentions. Then at least you'll walk away from our conversation knowing what it is that you need. And you can take responsibility for that. You can say, I chose this. I became aware of this. I need this. This is who I am. Whatever language makes sense to you. And so although it's very difficult in the marketing arena to have a language for that, because there's no promises, and I'm not teaching you, and you're not learning as far as I'm offering what I'm offering. I'm offering to honor my experience, to have a conversation. And the people that have the conversation will say, oh, it's amazing, and she teaches you all these things, and you have this self-awareness. And I love that they feel that way about it, and I love that they have those experiences, but I'm not taking responsibility for their perception of what was occurring. I can only take responsibility for my experience. And I equally value the people that come to have the conversation and say, it was crap and I don't believe anything that she says, and they want to argue about the truth of it, even though I've claimed no truth. And I equally value those conversations because it's all synchronicity. And the same goes for my own experience. If I listen to something or feel something that other people would label aggression or opposition, I understand the value of that experience. I accept the sacredness. We don't have a lot of analogies for acceptance. We have stories about a means to an end. So we have stories about going through hell, hitting the lowest point, being stripped bare, feeling abandoned, lost, desolate, lonely, separated, forgotten. And then having a moment of epiphany, about the fact that there's no separation, or that we are valuable, or love is everywhere, that meaning can be found in all manner of places. There are a lot of those light at the end of the tunnel stories. We don't have a lot of acceptance stories. We don't have a lot of everything is synchronicity stories. But I guess it's part of the writing that I'll be doing, is creating myths for us to explore oneness, not as a goal or an outcome or a process or a journey or a reward, but instead as an inherent truth, as an experience of now. And I'd love to share those with you. So there are a couple of ways to regularly become part of this conversation. There is a free library resource thing that you can sign up for, that will have all the replays. And if I talk about a PDF or something, it will be there, and you'll have access to other things that are not included here in the Oneness Point webinar series. And I'll include that link under the YouTube video and on the Google Hangout event if you decide you want to sign in. I was going to say, and say yet another membership, because we have so many things that we sign in for. But if you decide that's something that you want to explore, and you don't, there's no pressure. It doesn't kind of matter if you do it that way, or if you continue here, or if you just accidentally encounter me. You can also go to theonenessexperience.com, and there's a sign up for an email list, which will just mean you get an email every time these events are coming up, and it'll have the link to log into Webinar X, and you'll get a link to the replays. And I think I also send out the invitation to sign up for that free membership, because the difference would be, in the free membership you would log in and everything would already be there, and you would get regular emails about notifications. So if a new video was loaded in, or if the new event was coming up, you'd get that in your email automatically. So it just depends how you want to do it. I'll be having different conversations in different places according to what it is that I'm asked to say. So just have a think about what synchronicity means for you, because your truth is the only thing that really matters. And if you need to argue with everything that I have to say, that's great. Write down exactly what it is that's true for you. Never mind my version of the story. If you need to tune in and watch the videos in order to argue and really articulate what it is that's true for you, then use it like that. Use it as a resource of opposition. I find that equally valuable. And I'll love you either way, whether you agree with me or think I'm nuts or have no idea. As far as I'm concerned, in that it's all synchronicity story. You are spirit manifest. Your version of events are just as sacred as everyone else's. So have a fantabulous day. I'll talk next week.